Before there was electricity, there was a different kind of infrastructure problem. Ancient Rome fed 1 million people. 1 million people inside a single city. In 100 AD, no refrigeration, no supply chains, no cold storage apps, and somehow it worked. The secret wasn't the aqueducts, it wasn't the roads, it was the buildings most people walk right past. They were called Horia, massive warehouse complexes, state-owned, strategically placed. The Horia Galbana alone covered over 3 city blocks. And they weren't just storage rooms, they were engineered. Raised floors for airflow, 1.5-meter thick walls to hold temperature, narrow ventilation slots cut at exact angles to move heat without letting moisture in. These buildings were cooling systems before anyone had a word for cooling systems. The grain inside had to stay dry, had to stay cool, had to stay alive. Because if the Horia failed, Rome didn't eat. Here's what the residents near the Horia thought about them. Not great. The cart traffic ran all night, heavy loads, grinding wheels on stone, because that's when the deliveries happened. Roman law banned daytime cart traffic inside the city. The smell, grain dust, rats, wastewater from cleaning operations, and the buildings blocked the sun from the apartments next door. The complaints were exactly what you'd expect. Why does this have to be here? Why not somewhere else? Who decided this? Sound familiar? Here's the pattern. Every era has an infrastructure category that makes modern life possible, but that nobody wants next to their house. The Roman state didn't ask the neighbors if they wanted the Horia there, but those buildings made the city function. And 2,000 years later, we're having the exact same argument. Different buildings, same debate, same stakes. Every Google search you run lives here. Every Netflix episode you've watched tonight, processed here. Every AI conversation runs on servers inside a building that looks exactly like this, a data center. And here's what's wild about them. They're not designed for people. There might be 50 employees for a facility that occupies the size of multiple football fields. The rest of the space, machines. Row after row after row of server racks, running constantly, generating constant heat, drawing power that would supply tens of thousands of homes. They are, in every meaningful sense, the Horia of the digital age. And communities across America are having the exact same argument the Romans had. Before a single shovel goes in the ground, there's a map. And 3 things have to line up perfectly: power, connectivity, stable land. Power is the first filter. A hyperscale data center needs anywhere from 20 to 100 plus megawatts just to operate. That's not plug-it-in power. That's build a new substation power. Fiber connectivity is second. Thousands of miles of buried cable have to terminate somewhere near the site. And the land itself has to be flat, geologically stable, and in a low-risk zone for natural disasters. Because these facilities target 99.999% uptime, that's 5 minutes of downtime per year, maximum. When all 3 zones overlap on the map, that's where the developer makes an offer, often before the community even knows a data center is being planned. That's the part that creates friction. And honestly, the friction makes sense. The construction of a data center is different from anything else you'd build, because the building isn't the product. The environment inside the building is. Phase 1, site prep, leveling, excavation, massive utility footings. A data center's electrical infrastructure can weigh more than the structure itself. Phase 2, the building envelope. But this isn't standard construction. The walls need acoustic insulation because what lives inside is loud. The frame needs to handle the load of thousands of server racks. Fire suppression systems are built in from day one. Phase 3, mechanical fit-out. This is where data centers get interesting. The entire cooling infrastructure goes in. Chillers, cooling towers, precision air conditioning units. Getting this wrong means servers fail. Getting this right means the building earns its keep for 20 years. Phase 4, the servers, which counterintuitively go in last. The irony of data center construction is that the most expensive part, the equipment, can't even arrive until everything else is perfect. Here's the number that tells you if a data center is efficient. PUE, power usage effectiveness. It's simple. Take all the power a facility consumes, servers, cooling, lighting, everything. Divide it by just the power the servers use. Perfect efficiency is 1.0, every watt in, every watt to computation. That's not physically possible. The industry average is 1.56, meaning for every watt running a server, you're burning another 0.56 watts, keeping the building alive. The hyperscalers have pushed that number down hard. Google runs their entire global fleet at 1.09. Meta is at 1.08. For context, older corporate data centers from the 2000s ran at PUEs of 2.0 or higher. Half the electricity going to waste. The engineering got dramatically better, fast. And then AI happened. Here's what changed. A standard server from 5 years ago drew somewhere between 300 and 500 watts. The AI training servers going into new data centers today, 3,000 to 10,000 watts per server. Same physical rack. 20 times the heat output. That changes everything about the cooling system, about the electrical infrastructure, about the substation you need to build, about the water you need to move. The data centers being built right now aren't being built for the internet we had in 2015. They're being built for an AI workload nobody has fully estimated yet. That's why the facilities are getting bigger. The average data center site in 2024 covered 224 acres. That's a 144% increase from 2022. 2 years, 144%. The water question is real, and it's also more complicated than the headlines suggest. Data centers use water primarily for cooling. Warm air from the servers has to go somewhere. The cheapest, most energy-efficient way to get rid of it is evaporative cooling, essentially industrial-scale swamp coolers. Water evaporates, heat leaves. The problem, that water is gone. You can't get it back. In Arizona, data centers used approximately 905 million gallons of water in 2025. That sounds enormous. Golf courses in the same state use 29 billion gallons. Agriculture uses more than 70% of the state's total water budget. Data centers are under 0.1%. That doesn't mean there's no issue. In a water-scarce state, every new draw matters. But the math matters too, and the math is often missing from the conversation. The better technology, closed-loop cooling, solves most of it. Sealed pipes, water circulates indefinitely, virtually zero evaporative loss. The downside, it uses more electricity to run. Pick your trade-off. The best operators are already there. Amazon's global WUE is 0.19 liters per kilowatt hour. The industry average is 1.8, 10 times better than average. The technology exists. The question is whether developers use it. The noise complaints are legitimate. That's worth saying clearly. Neighbors near poorly sited data centers in Chandler, Arizona, and Prince William County, Virginia, have documented 24/7 low-frequency hum from cooling systems. Headaches, sleep disruption. Unlike a factory that clocks out at 5 p.m., a data center never stops. The servers never stop. The cooling never stops. The hum never stops. Over 140 activist groups across 24 states have organized specifically to block or further regulate data center construction. That's not nothing. But here's what matters. The noise problem is solvable. Acoustic barriers, berms, strategic landscaping, setback requirements. These aren't exotic engineering challenges. They're standard construction practices that sometimes get skipped when developers move fast. Communities that negotiate before construction begins can require them. Communities that find out after the permit is approved often can't. That's the leverage window, and most towns don't know it exists until it's closed. Here's the number that changes the conversation. Loudoun County, Virginia, home to over 200 data centers, the largest concentration of data center capacity anywhere on Earth. From 2016 to 2025, the county lowered its real property tax rate every single year, from 0.145 per $100 of assessed value down to 0.805. That's 0.34 back in the homeowner's pocket per $100 of their home's value per year. For the average Loudoun homeowner, that's over $500 a year that isn't going to the county because the data centers are paying it instead. The data center doesn't need good schools for its servers. It doesn't need the library, the parks, the emergency services. It pays the same taxes as a shopping mall, but asks for almost nothing in return. That asymmetry is exactly why communities that get the deal right come out ahead. The question is how you get the deal right. The electricity question is more complicated. PJM manages the grid across 13 states, including Virginia, where most of the country's data centers live. In 2024, capacity market auction prices spiked 833%. Let that land. 833%. For the 2025-2026 delivery year, part of that is data center demand. Part of it is that utilities have been retiring old power plants faster than they've been building new ones. The two things collided at the same time, and those costs don't stay at the wholesale level. They work their way into residential bills. Virginia's JLARC Commission projected that data center-driven grid expansion could add to 28 monthly residential electric bills by 2040. That's not nothing. That's a real concern for real families. The counter-argument, and it's a fair one, states with large data center loads have actually seen slower rate increases. Fixed grid costs get spread across more kilowatt hours sold. Both things are true. The math depends on where you live and how the state structures its rate classes. The good news is that rate class separation, making data centers pay for dedicated infrastructure they require, is being implemented. Virginia approved it. Other states are watching. It's a solvable problem, but it requires someone at the table who understands the math. Stockholm figured something out that most cities haven't. Data centers generate enormous amounts of waste heat you have to get rid of, heat that costs money and energy to remove. What if, instead of venting it into the sky, you piped it into people's homes? Stockholm's city heating network stretches 3,000 kilometers underground. It's been there since the 1950s, and over the last decade, The city has connected more than 30 data centers into that network. The waste heat from computing, which would otherwise be an environmental cost, now heats 30,000 apartments annually. Carbon neutral, no additional fuel, no additional emissions. The data center still functions perfectly. The servers don't care where their excess heat goes, but instead of that heat disappearing into the atmosphere, it's keeping someone's apartment warm in a Swedish winter. That's not an idealistic scenario. That's operating infrastructure right now. It works because Stockholm had the network already, and because city planners thought about the opportunity before the data centers were built. The technology transfers. The question is whether anyone asks the question early enough. Here's something that doesn't get reported much. Data centers, when they're designed right, can actually stabilize the grid, not just consume from it. A data center powered by a microgrid generates its own power on site. Solar, storage, sometimes natural gas. It can operate completely isolated from the utility during grid emergencies. Think about what that means during a summer heat wave. When the public grid is stretched, when a rolling blackout is hours away, a data center on a microgrid can disconnect instantly, freeing up megawatts of capacity for the surrounding community. And the advanced version, combined heat and power systems that run at 60 to 80% efficiency because they capture the waste heat from power generation and use it for cooling, not venting it, using it. The data center becomes a distributed energy asset, not just a load. That's not theoretical. Facilities using this model exist today. The difference between a burden and a resource, what was negotiated before the shovels went in. The communities that get the best outcomes from data centers do one thing differently. They negotiate before the permit is approved. A community benefit agreement, a CBA, is a legally binding contract between the developer and the local government before construction begins, before the zoning clears. It can require noise decibel limits at the property line, water usage caps, minimum percentages of local hires, grid contribution requirements, heat recovery opt-ins. Meta's El Paso facility agreed to an 80% property tax abatement in exchange for deploying a closed-loop cooling system that recycles water continuously, zero routine water consumption. The community got clean technology. Meta got a tax deal. Both sides won. That's what a good CBA looks like. The failure mode is Iowa. When Google proposed a massive facility near Cedar Rapids, Loudoun County moved to require water usage studies and permit protections. Google responded by relocating the project to a neighboring town, Palo, specifically to avoid those regulations. The county didn't get a bad deal. They got no deal. The leverage window is open during site selection. Once a developer has permits and has broken ground, it's closed. Here's where the data centers are terrible narrative breaks down. The buildings being built today are the most resource efficient in history. The average PUE is 1.56, meaning roughly half the overhead energy waste of the facilities from 20 years ago. The technology is genuinely improving, fast. Communities that get the deal right, that use the leverage window before permits clear, come out measurably ahead. Loudoun County homeowners save over $500 per year on property taxes. Washington State data center industry supports nearly 48,000 jobs when you count the indirect ecosystem, security, maintenance, construction, IT services. Data centers generate approximately 50 times more tax revenue per gallon of water than the golf industry in Arizona. Think about that the next time someone compares the two. The controversy is real. The concerns are legitimate. The noise, the water, the grid pressure, those are facts, not talking points. But the Roman residents near the Horia were also right that it was loud and smelled like grain dust at 2 a.m. They were also wrong that Rome should have gotten rid of it. The buildings that run your world are being built right now. In towns across America, local governments are sitting across the table from the largest tech companies on earth. Whether those buildings become Loudoun County or become Lynn County depends entirely on whether someone at that table knew what to ask for. The Horia are still there. Walk along the Tiber in Rome and you'll find their foundations, the raised floors, the ventilation slots, the thick walls that kept things cool 2,000 years before air conditioning. They outlasted the city that built them. The buildings going up right now might too. You now know what's being built in your backyard, what it means for your electricity bill, your water supply, your property taxes, more than most elected officials making those decisions. That's the blueprint. If this one made you think differently about the infrastructure hidden in plain sight, subscribe. There's a lot more hidden in plain sight. And if you've got thoughts on this one, drop them in the comments. Genuinely curious where you land on the data center debate, like if the Roman parallel landed for you. And hey, thank you, really. Every watch, every comment, every share keeps this thing going. I don't take that lightly. Next video, we're pulling back the curtain on something that affects every building you've ever lived in, something that's been quietly failing for decades, and almost nobody talks about it. Stay close.